How should you fund your next car? A very, very common question, and most people are confused. Watch this video and I'll cover for you in detail the examples, and I'm also going to share with you what I do. I'm going to share one thing with you about electric cars, which might just change your view on which car to get. Deciding on which way to fund your next car and which business structure to use is always an interesting conversation that I come across with people, because it's quite complicated. Because on one end, you're thinking, should I have a sole trader business, a partnership, an LLP, limited liability partnership, or a limited company? On the other side, you're thinking, do I claim mileage? Do I buy the car? Do I buy a brand new car or second-hand car? Do I lease it? Do I do contract hire? So it's a whole rigmarole of things that you need to be thinking about before deciding which method to use to get your car. On top of that, then it's deciding how much you can afford. So let's kind of cover the real basics to give you a conceptual understanding of which way to go. Just so you know, I'm not going to cover detailed tax benefits or costings or numbers per se. For this video, I want you to understand just the basic premise and the principle, so you have a clear direction on where you ought to go. And if you want more detail, I can subsequently record another video for you where we go into detail, where we choose a particular example of a car or a couple of cars and look at the tax implications for using different types of option purchases or ways of funding your car. So the first thing is your business structure. So as you know, you've got 4 clear options: sole trader, partnership, limited liability partnership, or a limited company. And the one that you use will to some extent dictate the kind of tax you pay. So let me just cover the real basics for you. Let's say you've got a second-hand car that you own. You could use that for your business and charge 45 pence per mile for the first 10,000 miles in any one tax year. And you'll know quite well that a tax year starts on the 6th of April every year and ends on the 5th of April the following year. And every year on the 6th of April, this figure is reset to 0. So if in one tax year you drive 10,000 miles, you claim 45 pence per mile, which gives you £4,500 that you can claim in that year. If you go over 10,000 miles for business purposes, you get to claim at 25 pence per mile for any additional mile over the 10,000 miles. If you have a passenger with you, or like a fellow employee who you pick up and drop off, then there's an extra 5 pence per mile for you to claim too. So that works reasonably well, but you might not be too happy with your second-hand car. So you might be thinking, let me get a brand new car, or I'm thinking of getting a brand new car. What shall I do? Let me share an example with you before we go further. So a year after having started my business, I went to a local BMW dealership and thought, let's have a look at some cars. Just basically to have a look. Walk in there, have a chat, cup of tea, couple of biscuits, and walk out having purchased a brand new BMW M3 for £52,500. The basic starting price of the car was about £38,000. I'd added £14,500 worth of extras, and the salesman had done a fantastic job in terms of convincing me that I could afford to pay X amount per month for the car, plus I had to pay a deposit. Now that was quite a few years ago, and I think I paid a £15,000 deposit, and then I was paying around about £800 per month for that particular car. You use that car for exactly 12 months. I think I did about 17,000 miles or thereabouts, might have been 15,000 miles, and I sold the car for £38,000. So I lost 14.5 grand. So I basically sold it for the basic price of the car when I was going to buy it. So I lost £14,500 on the car, which is the depreciation. Plus obviously I'd paid the deposit of 15 grand, plus the monthly payments that I'd paid towards the car. Some of those were paying off the loan. Most of that for the first year was interest. And that particular experience taught me a lot. The first thing it taught me was never ever to buy a depreciating asset. Always somehow lease it. So since then, what I've been doing is using contract hire. Very simple terms. You find a company that offers you contract hire, and you then agree on the type of car that you want to get. For our example here, let's just stick to simple 3 Series BMW. You look around and decide, yep, I want this particular BMW. And then you have an option, how long do you want it for? Now, different leasing companies will offer you different periods. The shortest I've seen is 6 months. The longest I've seen is 4 years. Some might do 5 years. But I'm going to keep this example very easy and simple for you. Let's say it's 3 years. So how it usually works is you have a payment profile of 3 plus 23. So you make 23 monthly payments, whatever the figure might be. For our example here, let's say £300 plus VAT. But then for this particular profile, you also make 3 payments up front. So it's 300 times 3, which is £900 plus VAT as the upfront payment, plus 23 payments of £300 plus VAT every single month. And you also pay like an admin fee or a contract fee, which is usually a couple of £100 at the start. However, where it gets interesting is, if you wanted to make the payment smaller, you can change the profile here and make this 6 plus 23. So because you're paying a bit more upfront, your monthly premium usually goes down by the additional 3 months payments you've made on top of the first 3 months payments that I've just shared with you. So now you're paying 6 as opposed to 3. So the extra 3 knocks off the price here. So let's just say this might end up becoming £275 or whatever the figure may work out to be, just to keep it really simple here. Or you could go 9 plus 23, which means that might become 250 or something smaller, because sometimes people are able to pay a bigger upfront fee and would rather reduce the monthly payment. On top of this, if you want to add extras with the sound system, leather seats, other bits and bats, that all gets added up over the period. So let's say you add £3,000 worth of extras. They'll add that to your monthly price. So they'll do £3,000 worth of extras divided by 24 months equals an extra X amount, whatever the X amount may be, that gets added to your price here. So you pay for those extras. At the end of the period, you give the car back, and this price usually is dictated on the number of miles you're going to drive. So if you're going to drive, let's say 10,000 miles per annum, so over 2 years, it's going to be 20,000 miles. The price is £300 per month, for example. If you're going to drive 15,000 miles per year, over 2 years, that's £30,000 miles. This price might be £400 a month, for example. So the more miles that you're going to drive, the more obviously the car is going to depreciate, the more you pay. At the end of the term, if you've driven the miles that you contracted to drive, you just give the car back, bar any damage. So if there's some real small damage, small scratches here there, it's okay. Any kind of bigger damage, you need to either get it fixed or you pay when the car goes back. And the car usually goes back to auction. So they'll say to you, these are all the defects, and to fix these defects is £1,500, pays £1,500, and the car goes away. Simple as that. If you want, the road tax is included. MOT, obviously the car, because they're brand new cars, no need to do an MOT for the first 3 years. And if you want to take out a maintenance package, including tires and servicing, then they'll give you an additional price that usually is based on their own estimate of how many times you need to maintain the car in terms of the service and change tires, etc., based on the number of miles you're doing. So they'll add that on the price as a maintenance package, or you could say, I'll look after all that myself. So at the end, when they come in to take the car, they're going to check to make sure you've serviced the car, and they'll check all the tires to make sure that they are legal. If they are, fine. If not, you need to change the tires. So that's that. This cost you claim through your company because you don't own the asset, so it's not on your balance sheet. And the VAT element, if it's 100% business use, you claim all the VAT back. If it's got some personal use, you claim half the VAT back. So if it's £400 plus VAT, the VAT element's £80. 100% business use, you claim all the £80 back. If you're VAT registered, that is. If you're not VAT registered, obviously you don't claim back the VAT. If there's some personal use, you claim back £40 of the VAT, which is 50% of the £80. The other 40% you can't claim back. The good thing is you're not responsible for the depreciation. The other good thing is, which I want to cover in some of these scenarios, is there's usually not a hefty deposit, especially if you go for a 3 plus 23. Think about it. Let's say new BMW, a 3-series BMW costs you £30,000, for example, okay? And you're paying £900 plus VAT, plus a small admin fee of £200. So you're paying £1,100 plus the VAT on the £900 to jump into a £30,000 car. That's pretty much unheard of in any other scenario. You're not going to be able to get a £30,000 car by paying a 3 plus 23 or £1,100. It's just not going to happen with any of the other options. So it really is a fantastic way to get cars. I do this all the time and it works really well. The thing you ought to be aware of is, obviously, if you go over the agreed mileage, at the start they'll tell you how much they're going to charge you extra. So for example, they might say you need to pay 8 pence per mile extra for every mile you do over the contracted mileage. So if the contracted mileage was, say, 20,000 over 2 years, you've done an additional 10,000 miles and you've driven 30,000 miles. So for the extra 10,000 miles at 8 pence, you're going to have to pay £800 to them at the end of the term, which still, if you think about it, isn't that bad. So contract hire works really well, as long as obviously you keep an eye on the mileage. At the end, the car goes back. You're not worried about depreciation. You just find a new car. And there are some really cracking deals out there. I mean really cracking deals. I'm not going to run you through those deals, but if you look online, just type in contract hire and just look around for about 45 minutes to an hour on different websites. You will find some really, really good deals. And sometimes they have special offers on certain cars. So a particular supplier may agree a contract, let's say with Mercedes, where they say, here you go, they take 50 or 100 S-Class Mercs from us in this particular year or this particular quarter, and we'll give you a good amount of discount. They pass on that discount, or some of that discount, to their customers, i.e. people like you and me, and put a special offer on that Merc, and that could be a really good deal. I'll find some phenomenal deals, which, if you think about it, I mean, some of the cars I've been in, 80, 90, 100 grand cars, and I've paid £500 plus VAT a month. And a 3 plus 23 profile usually, so let's talk about an 80 grand car. I've done a 3 plus 23 profile, paying £500 plus VAT per month. Up front, I've paid £1,500 plus VAT, plus the £200 admin fee, let's call it £1,700 in total, plus the VAT element. To get into an 80 grand car, I mean, that's phenomenal. And this is why I always use contract hire. I think it's a really good way to get cars. Now let's look at some other options in terms of getting cars. But before I do that, what I ought to tell you is, if this particular deal, as in contract hire, is through your limited company and you've got a personal use of the car, then you'll have to pay benefit in kind tax, which quite simply means the HMRC have a particular way for you to work out how much tax is payable on the car. It's not based on the list price plus the CO2 emissions. So the more of a gas guzzler your car, the more tax you're going to have to pay. If this is done through a sole trader partnership or LLP, there's no company car tax to pay. But what happens is you work out how much you're using the car for personal purposes, and you only claim back the business element. Let's work through a quick example. The car will cost you £10,000 per year, and you're going to drive the car 75% business use, 25% personal use. And that's 10 grand all in. So because 25% is personal use, we put P for personal, you can only claim 7,500, which is the 75%. For business purposes, the other 2.5 grand you can't claim because that's for personal element. You can't do that through a limited company. You've got to pay benefit in kind tax, and that could be a huge amount. So maybe a contract hire through a limited company might not be the best route, but if you've got a sole trader partnership or an LLP, then it's worth thinking about. So that's something that you ought to bear in mind. So the next option is a sale and leaseback. Very simply here, you sell your car and then you lease it back through a leasing company, and there's no requirement for you to buy the car back. The big benefit here, of course, is that it frees up capital, because when you sell the cars, you get cash coming in. You can use that cash to do whatever you like. You can invest it in your business or do something else. And because you don't own the asset, it removes all the depreciation, so you're not responsible for the loss of value in a car. Just to link this back to the previous example of contract hire, the beauty and the smart people who are getting a contract hire car, like I shared with you, when I bought the BMW M3, I paid a £15,000 deposit. On a contract hire, you're only paying, like, let's say on a 3 plus 23 profile, maybe £1,150 as the 3-month profile. So in my example, you're saving the £15,000. Invest that £15,000 on the stock market, on cryptocurrency, possibly on a piece of art, in some other shares, or in property, which is what I prefer doing. And over 2 years, the value of property, depending where we are in the life cycle of property and the economy, over 2 years, let's say the property increases by 4 grand a year. Okay? And again, I'm just an example, because I have no idea how much the property is going to increase, because it depends on the area and demand and that type of stuff, and where we are in the economic life cycle. But let's just say it increases by 4 grand per year. If you look at my earlier example, you're paying £300 for the 3 Series BMW every month. If you're VAT registered and you use the car 100% for company or business purposes, you get all the VAT back. You're paying £300 per month times 12. You're paying 3,600. You spent that or invested that 15 grand. If you had the 15 grand, using my earlier example, in a property, the property's gone up by 4 grand. The car's cost you 3,600. So pretty much the increase or uplift in value of the property covers the car. So in a roundabout way, although you're not going to sell the property, the increase in value covers the cost of the car. And if you sell the asset, you can obviously, there might be capital gains to pay on that asset, but it might be enough to cover the cost of the car. You're driving the car for free. The only difference is you're paying out for the car, so cash flow is going out. You might not sell the property, or so although the value or equity is in the property, you're still holding on to it. But in a roundabout way, at some point you'll catch up if you ever sell that property or refinance it and free the cash flow. So you could, if you're smart enough and you do your numbers based on where you're going to buy the property, how much it's going to increase by, and creating cash flow in terms of rental income, fund your car and drive it pretty much for free. It might not be free on a month-by-month basis, but after 3 or 4 years, when you refinance or do the numbers, you could end up driving the car or a car for free. It doesn't get better than that, does it? So, if you do a sale and lease back, then remember, you don't own the asset. You're going to have to be careful on the mileage, because if you own the car yourself, you can drive as many miles as you like, because it's your car. The more you drive, the more it depreciates. With a lease back, there is limited mileage, so you need to be careful that you stay within that mileage. And this only applies to businesses that have an asset to sell to then lease back. Obviously, if you don't have a car to sell, you can't lease it back. So you just need to be aware of that. Your next option is a contract purchase. Here you enter into a contract, you take the car away, you agreed on how many miles you're going to drive the car. At the end of the period, let's say 2 years, you take the car back and say, I said I would do 20,000 miles over 2 years. I've done 20,000 miles. At that time, when you took the car out, you agreed a value for the car. So let's say you got the car and it was worth £30,000, and the dealership said to you, in 2 years' time, if you drive 20,000 miles, the car's worth £20,000. At that time, if you've done 20,000 miles or less, you then pay £20,000 to keep the car, or you pay nothing and you walk away. If, however, you go over the mileage, and let's say you've done 30,000 miles as opposed to 20,000 miles, at the end, when you get to year 2, you can pay £20,000 and buy the car, and it's yours. If, however, you think, I don't want the car anymore, and you want to walk away, you can't just walk away, because the dealership will say to you, you've gone 10,000 miles over the agreed mileage, therefore the car isn't worth £20,000, the car is worth £15,000. So you can walk away, but you need to pay an extra £5,000 to walk away. So take the car for 20 grand, or walk away and pay the extra 5 grand. So you need to be aware of that, and you need to know exactly how that works. If you use the car 100% for business purposes, the VAT that you pay on the contract purchase agreement, you can claim back, and which works well if you're VAT registered. If you're not VAT registered, obviously that doesn't work well. The cost you can claim back for corporation tax purposes, so that's going to work well for you. And obviously, if you're using the car for personal purposes, benefit in kind if it's through a limited company. And again, that depends on the type of car you have, the value, and the CO2 emissions. Now, you might be thinking, well, and by the way, there are other options for you as well, in terms of you can do hire purchase, which is exactly what I did with my BMW M3 earlier example. Or you might have cash in the bank, 30 grand, you go to a BMW dealership and buy that 3 Series we were talking about earlier. Okay, but why would you stick 30 grand in a car when you can invest 30 grand and turn that into 40, 50, 60,000 pounds and use some of those funds to purchase the car? Remember, rule number 1, do not buy assets that depreciate, lease them, or in this particular example, or the purpose of this video here is contract hire them. So now, if you have a limited company and you're thinking, I don't really want to pay the benefit in kind tax because it's extortionate and it's expensive, understandable. A good route that you have, and the government incentivizes you to do this, is to go electric. And let's say you wanted a Tesla, for example, that just comes to mind, and you get that this year. For the tax year 2021, 2022, which is where we are right now, if you get a Tesla, the company car benefit charge is 1%. That is extremely low. Next year, 2022, 2023 tax year, it's 2%. So if you're thinking about going electric, good idea. The type of car you buy is up to you. But if the car is fully electric, the tax rate is very, very low. Depending on whether you go contract hire or whether you do hire purchase. If you do hire purchase, you can even claim capital allowances on the car, which means you'll reduce the amount of tax you pay to the company. If you do contract hire, obviously you give the car back at the end, but the benefit in kind tax is really low. If you go hybrid, then it's slightly higher than fully electric, but nowhere as much as a diesel or a petrol car. So think about going electric. The advantages are good from a tax point of view. Now I know for some people the range isn't enough and charging points and all that kind of stuff. That's something that you need to kind of consider. But if you want a car and you want to keep it efficient, having an electric car is the best way to go forward. That's my first bit for you on company cars. Hopefully that gives you some direction. Just to make it very clear, I prefer contract hire. I've been doing contract hire since 2005, and I always get cars on contract hire because it works exceptionally well, and the cash that I would tie up in buying a car or in paying for a large deposit, I use that to invest somewhere, and I try and make that money work for me, which ends up paying for the car. So in a roundabout way, at the end of the year, I drive a car or the car for free, and you can do the same.